today to go through
Okay.
Charles' meeting. So which means it's on my list of things, along with a whole bunch of other things like looking at Stephen codes too. Seems like there's a lot of things. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So Tal's workshop will kind of go through and explain some things you would already, Vish, since you've been involved for a long time, you probably already have from the workshop. But then it starts to get in near the end around this package variant stuff. So what I want to do is, I guess, to start, make this kind of an open discussion. That's what the questions thing was, where I can help folks with things they aren't quite getting or aren't clear yet. We haven't made clear yet in the structure, and it might be helpful to kind of go through the sort of vision of how we see the flow working. But I don't know, I don't want to take it like too far, right? Like it's I'm trying to gauge, and I don't know how to do that. And yeah.
So my issues, my struggle right now is I'm familiar with the workshop code. I've looked through some, not all, everything of the seed code, and I sat through Tal's workshop. So there are like 3 nodes of information or direction, and I'm trying to synthesize. And
Right.
that's where for example, the seed code has the controllers, but it gets to a certain point, and now from the bottom up, from SMF up, how do I meet that? How do I hook into it? And I'm hoping that Stephen will cover it tomorrow, but it boils down to a bigger design needed.
Right.
An integration.
Yeah, right. So all right. So let me share this. Okay. So this is gonna let me draw. So what this thing is like a Jamboard. So you'll be able to go to a URL on your machine and you'll see what I'm drawing, and you can contribute to the drawing too or whatever. Sorry, I think. I think this would be useful. All right, so now let me. Let me see how to do that. And then I think I can paste it in the Slack. So what I'm thinking then is I'll go through. I'll ask the group here, right? So the things I put down is that I thought we should cover. I can show you how I'm setting up my sort of development environment for this sub-project. So for this sub-project, all we actually need is a Kubernetes cluster running Porch and other eventually Nefio controllers and things, and repositories. We don't need actual workload clusters for this sub-project. Now, it's fine if you have them, but it can be simpler to set up an environment. So I'd be happy to go through kind of how I'm doing that, or we could do that offline or something if we don't feel it's a good use of this time. Or, that's why I said questions first. The second thing is I can go through the package variant set and package variant controllers as they're implemented today versus the sort of design proposal that I have for things that I believe need to be added based upon our requirements. And then the third thing is to talk a little bit about one of our first tasks, which is to try to build a package or set of packages that represents a network function and a topology of network functions across clusters, and use that to identify additional gaps. So I have an example of this for what I would call an application as opposed to a network function, which is the caching DNS. And I already can see some things that are gaps that we maybe don't need to solve in R1, but we might want to solve in a later release. So what I could really think could be really helpful from people in this group who I don't have knowledge of UPFs and SMFs and AMFs and the inputs that go into them and all of that. So starting to try and put together a package for each of those, and then a package that represents the topology of those, would discover new gaps within the functionality that we either solve in Porch or we solve in Nefio. I don't care so much, but right now we have 2.5 months, roughly, not even, and so we need to get our gaps identified very quickly. So that's what I want to do. Is so the idea is, can I help the team here bootstrap to the level where we can start as a team identifying those gaps and even solving those gaps. Yeah, and
So I think the second and third items that you mentioned will be more helpful, at least for me. I'm not speaking for the group, obviously, than the first, because the first, a lot of us have gone through, right? And you can probably record that and we can.
as I was thinking, I'm like, maybe I should just do that and record it, and then just people can watch it on their own time.
Yeah, because the second and third things are more the meat of the problem right now.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah, Vish.
So you were talking about the setup, right? One suggestion or something I want to bring about is, like, when you're talking about setting up the Kubernetes cluster, are we still going to, is the kind cluster good enough? What I want to be able to do is one place for everybody to go to, which is, based on the workshop VM. If they don't want
that's
edge
fine
cluster,
too. Yeah.
So that way we don't have too many different things that we need to go off. It's like, hey, go use the workshop VM,
So
follow the steps. You don't need this, you can comment it out. That's the way, it'll make it very easy.
It's fine, that will work fine. The complication is, how do it becomes harder to say, oh, I want to have 30 clusters that are, 3 of them are regional and 27 of them are edge, and I want 3 tiers of edge. I don't want 1 tier of edge. I want far edge, near edge and mid edge, right? Like, and I want regional. Like, eventually we want to do that kind of thing, and doing that all with actual clusters that are actuating things, it becomes more challenging. So we don't need to worry about that right now. For 90% of what we need to do over the next month or two, just using the VMs as they are is sufficient.
Okay, good to know. Thank you. That way we have one less variable that we need to go and one place to go set up my environment or infra. Thank you.
Yeah, Vish, maybe it's maybe quick. What we should do is the Ansible script, right? Actually, we have the flexibility to make it only work management cluster, for example. So we could add that flexibility in that thing. That, for example, for this development, we only have to spin up these things, right? So I think all the infrastructure is available to do so. We just probably have to put a little bit of effort to make that happen. And then you can spin up any environment with the configuration that you want. And then I think we can satisfy all of this flexibility going forward.
Yeah, good idea. That's why I want to make sure that your effort, that initial effort that you have put in, and people getting familiar with that can be reused, and we don't have to learn something else and have an unsupported thing, basically.
Yeah, because I do that myself, by the way, but maybe we have to document a little bit. So you can basically spin up the whole thing and basically say, I only need the management cluster. Actually, the scripts today do that, but nobody knows about it, I think.
Yeah, I know. It's about, like, we need that at the point when we want to use it, right? Sort of. I know. I'm glad you have that. Yeah.
So hopefully I can share this. I think I've shared these externally before with people. I just put it in the Slack channel. But we'll try it. If it doesn't work, then I'll just try to do my best to talk. But I think it would be helpful if people, I'll have to grant you access individually. I don't see a way to give access to everybody. Okay. Yep, BJ, okay. So yeah, make those requests. All right, I'm waiting for the. Okay, I see. Yeah, okay. Fish. Okay. It's really annoying. I have to do them one at a time. I can try sharing it. Some of you are on the old. Yeah, let's see. Well, hopefully this is worth the few minutes we're spending on it. Has everybody gotten, I've done all the ones I've received emails for. Okay, so let's
Yeah,
try
I got
this.
access, yeah.
Who said that, Paolo? What was that?
Yeah, I was just responding, saying that I got access. I was acknowledging I was getting it. I got access.
Okay. Cool. All right. Okay, so yep, finish. Okay. So then can we start with maybe with the kind of package variant stuff? Is that what people want to start with? If people feel like they understand packages, they understand, repositories in Porch, we understand how we clone things from one to the other. Yeah, okay. Oh, yeah. Okay. Go back to my agenda. So let's cross that out. All right. So the idea behind package variant, I'm not going to be able to watch my email, so pipe up if you still don't have access. But the idea here, we'll leave that go away. So the idea is that if you recall, in package variant or in the workshop, we had something called a package deployment, and
Hey John, sorry. I don't think I've gotten the access. Can you just check now?
okay.
Did
you request
pinged you
it?
pinged you my email ID
Okay,
in the Zoom chat.
in the Zoom chat. Okay. Let me find the Zoom chat. There it is. I don't see it in the Zoom chat.
Okay. Yeah, it's to the Twizy.
Oh, I can't get to that. That's on this thing.
Okay.
Do it on PMO admin. Sorry. Or PMO admin.
Yeah. Okay. 1 minute.
Sorry, it's complicated. Maybe it's not worth it, but hopefully it will be useful.
Yeah. Sure.
Okay, cool.
Yes.
There we go.
Sorry to be
Okay.
taking your time. Sorry.
No. It's just, like, my God, too many machines.
Oh, hi, John. Sorry for interrupting. I just wanted to confirm that currently the screen is empty, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thanks.
John,
Unless you drew.
sorry. John, I don't think I got the invite, the link. I check email.
Oh, I can't share that, Akash, with your.
Okay.
No, I'm sorry. For some reason, I can't share that with your
Yeah.
VMware.com. It's giving me an issue. You probably
Okay.
need to share it with like a Gmail address.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I put in the Slack, I put the link, so you'd have to click on that and then say,
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Slack. Got it.
yeah.
You mean any group, or you messaged me? I don't see.
So, Akash, I need it. So for some reason, VMware is either restricting. Oh, okay, you gave it. Cool. Yeah, that should work. Hopefully it's.
I've also seen my Gmail ID. Email.
Yep. It should be shared with your Gmail now. And then Anne is the only other one, which I have your email, but I would have to find it. Okay, there we go. Share it.
Thanks.
And the sharing settings. All right, that's a lot of time spent on that, guys. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thanks. Sorry.
Hopefully it's not. Hopefully it's worth it. Okay. Yes. Hi. Okay. So let's see. And please interrupt me with questions because I don't, like I said, I don't know where people are. But the idea is that when you went through Tal's workshop, right, there were areas where you're like, okay, you pull the package out, you make changes to it, and then you push it to a different repository. So that's what we would call creating a variant of the package, right? You're making edits to it, and then you're pushing it to a different repository. So now you've got a chain where you have an upstream package. Yeah, you have like an upstream package, and you have another package downstream, and you're using like kept, or even you can even use VI and make edits to the file, whatever, and you're pushing it there. So the idea of package variant is, can we do some automation around that process? So it's basically just, at its very simplest level, it's just a resource that says, here's your upstream, its package, foo version 2 in some repository, and the downstream.
Hey, John, if I may interrupt you, if you don't mind, since you're recording this, do you mind sharing your Jamboard so that somebody
Oh,
watching?
good idea. Yeah.
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 Yeah, it's for the people who can watch later. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Share.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah.
Yep. I'm sharing. Sorry, Anne, I'm sharing your email address. Okay. I didn't realize I should have copied it. Okay. Yes. So the package variant resource. Sorry, my handwriting is awful. The package variant resource just is an attempt to automate this process. And so the basics of this process are you specify the upstream, this package, and you specify the downstream, which basically is a repo name and a package name. Now, because when you do this process, right, you can change the package name. I can take package name foo from the organizational catalog repository. I can clone it into bar and then push bar with that name up to my deployment repository. And so there's separate, repo for the upstream and downstream. And when you're automating this, of course, there's situations you have to deal with that you might not otherwise have to deal with. When you're doing it manually, you just make the decisions. So for example, what happens when the user deletes this resource? Do we delete the downstream package from the repository? So which potentially could undeploy it from some cluster, or do we leave it there? So that's what we call our deletion policy. And then there's another thing of like, okay, you create this resource, the controller comes in and it sees that there's already a downstream package matching its name and repository. What does it do? And that's the adoption policy. All right. Those are the very, very basic things. It does all of those things right now. You could create a package variant resource directly, and it would do a clone operation from one repo to another, taking the upstream to the downstream to the new name. And then going forward, it would actually only open a draft. It doesn't do proposals and approvals. If you recall, in Porch, we have a life cycle of a package, and you looked at that in the Taos workshop. And so it's up to other humans or controllers to take that package past the draft stage. It also doesn't care past the cloning whether people make edits to that draft. So this is where the package specialization project later can come in and start making edits to that draft. Was there a question? Okay. There's a few other little things it can do today. I believe you can specify annotations and labels. Recall remember there's package revision resources. Sorry, terrible writing. A package revision represents, like when I say a draft, it's a package revision. And the publishing and things like that are on a package revision. So the package variant is a resource you put in the Kubernetes cluster. The package variant controller uses it to take an upstream package revision from an upstream repository and create a new draft package revision in a downstream repository. At that point, it can apply annotations and labels to that package revision. This can be useful in our automations to pick up and find that revision later for some other controller to do something with. So this is what it does today. So the package variant. Why don't I talk about package variant set, which this by and of itself, it's sort of like, why wouldn't I just do that manually, right? Why would I need to have a controller do that? I can just do that, right? It's instead of creating the resource, I can create the package revision. So who cares? And that's probably true a lot of the time with what it does today, except when you bring in a package variant set. So package variant set, does it advance automatically? So you have to advance. I advance to the second page. So there's at the top, you click the little next frame thing. So package variant set is another resource, and it's got another controller which runs, and all it does is manage the creation and deletion of package variants, just like in Kubernetes basic workload controller. The deployment creates replica sets create pods, package variant sets create package variants, and it doesn't really worry about it beyond that. So it offers you, of course, then an upstream. So this is just going to be basically copied directly into the upstream of any package variant it creates. So that would be like, foo v2. But for the downstream, it's more sophisticated. This is where it gets more interesting. It allows 3 different ways to target what package variants it creates. So you can do I don't know the actual, what the actual key is, the field name is, but you have something like targets, and it can be a list of repo package name pairs, or it can be a label selector against repos, along with an expression for package name. I'll explain that in a second. Or it can be an arbitrary object selector along with an expression. So it also offers you access to the other package variant fields like labels, annotations. I think those are static right now. Theoretically, they could be parameterized based on the target. I don't think we do that today. Okay, so what does this do? Basically, you could say, take the package foo and clone it into repo 1 with the name bar, into repo 2 with the name foo bar, with the, so you can imagine, for example, if we're thinking in terms of that targeting or fan out. This is what we would call fan out, being a cluster, but it doesn't have to be a cluster. It could be, I want to create development environments for all the developers in my organization. So I'm going to, which means I'm going to create a namespace for them with certain resources in it and certain resource quotas in it. So I'm going to just list them all. Here's John, here's Wim, here's Ann, and by delivering to this repo, I automatically create namespaces. So there's more we can do with it than just cluster targeting, which is why there's a variety of ways to do it. This one right here, the second one, label selector against repos, is probably the place we'll start, because we can, in the workshop, we had a Nephew cluster object, so we could also do the third one. But if we just put labels on the repo resources, since we have a one-to-one relationship between repo and workload cluster, that's actually good enough for now. So we might start with that, but we may find reasons to do the third one. Okay, so what did I mean by expression for the package name? So in this one, it's an explicit list of static, repo name, package name. But this Second one allows you to, for example, name the package based upon the name of the repository or add a suffix. Like if we have a repository that's named after the workload cluster and we want to name our actual instance with a suffix that's the workload cluster, you would use an expression instead of a static value for the package name. We actually probably don't need that immediately, but it's something we might want to do. The third one is, like I said, it's very similar to the second one. It's just that instead you have to specify group, version, kind, and then a label selector in addition to the package name. So you could actually do everything in the second one. With the third one, it's just more convenient to do it in the second one. So what does it do? You take this into the controller, the package variant set controller, and it outputs package variants. So this is what we call fan out. 1, 2, 3. It doesn't actually deal with any cloning or anything like that. It just creates and manages this list of package variants and lets the other package variant controller deal with all the other details. Now, of course, it's also going to have your adoption policies and deletion policies. And it's going to both, actually, I don't, it begs the question, you can adopt, they might even be separate adoption and deletion policies than the ones the package variant has. I don't know if that's done correctly today. I suspect it uses the same one. So for example, package variant is talking about adoption and deletion of package revisions. Package variant set is talking about adoption and deletion of package variants. But it also has to copy, it also has to set a policy on each of the package variants it creates. So there's actually maybe 2, but I don't think that, I think it's probably wrong. So there's a gap if we need it. We already identified one, I suspect. I don't know for sure. So this does all the basic Kubernetes controller stuff that you need to manage a list like this. It sets owner references on these package variants, which is the way Kubernetes keeps track of, this particular package variant set resource tracks these particular set of package variants. So if a human comes in and mucks with this, the controller will correct it. If a new repository pops up in the list, we'll propose a new package variant. If somebody deletes a repository from the list, we will delete the package variant. So it does all of that kind of management of change as it happens. This is what's implemented today. Are there questions on this functionality, either on it directly or on how we would use it in Nefio? Because the next step is to talk about what the known gaps are in what we need. Yeah, Bala.
Yeah, thanks, John. So let's say we have this package variant set and it's been fanned out to 10 different clusters. And then we make a day 2 change on the upstream repo.
Yes.
Since it tracks all the 10 downstream repos, then automatically we will be able to apply to all of them. Is that the right understanding?
Yes. So what you would do is if a new foo package, and I have, can I do this? So I have foo package here, right? I would say a new version comes out, foo v3. Then nothing happens until I go in here and I change this to foo v3. Then this says, aha, and goes and updates that in each of these. Then the package variant controller, going back a click, the package variant controller says, aha, this is now foo v3, and it proposes a new draft. It doesn't automatically update because there might be more things that need to be done. There might be a human approval process. There might be rollout policies. It just proposes a new draft. When it proposes that new draft, it takes the existing published version of the downstream and does effectively a kept package update on that to bring it up to date with the new upstream. And the idea is that a kept package update can be smarter than an ordinary git merge. I don't know how much smarter it is today. This is another potential gap, but not for R1, where we want to potentially make it smarter. But because it has knowledge that it's not just doing an ordinary git merge against a random text file, it knows I'm merging not only YAML, I'm merging KRM, not only KRM, but KRM, or I might actually understand it. So I can understand the difference between adding a key to a list, adding a label and not adding, so I can potentially be smarter. There's still, because it's the real world, will always be issues that humans might have to look at, or other automations might have to look at. But we're hoping that we can, we have the mechanism or the framework now to start solving some of those problems. Does that make sense?
Yes, thanks, John. I think you also covered my subsequent questions. Just for the just to spell it out, my question was, obviously, if there are 10 downstream clusters and then 10 downstream repos, and say we wanted to cherry pick this version change only into the 5, I think you already answered. So basically, package variant just proposes, and a human can always decide not to apply it, or maybe apply it only for a subset of the clusters.
Yeah, if you're applying for a subset of the clusters and that's a permanent state as opposed to like a rollout state, I would probably suggest you split your package variant set into 2, because now there's a material difference between those 2 clusters, these 2 sets. For some reason, you want to manage them separately. But and you could split that by changing your label selectors and adding a separate label, so we tend in our examples we've given so far in Nafio workshop and stuff, is the label selectors are like all edge clusters in region 1. But really, you can have any labels you want. They can be a customer name, they can be a deployment name that's completely arbitrary, and you manually tag individual clusters where you want it to go, but you let the machinery manage the actual processing of those tags. So, if you're doing a rollout process, yeah, it makes sense to keep them all in one set and potentially do them a little bit at a time. But if you're actually saying, no, these clusters are different, I want different workloads in a different version permanently, then I would split them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thanks, John. So would that split, should it happen by when we define the package variant set, or do you think, say I created a package variant set, and then 6 months down the line, my requirements have changed, now I want to split it. So is that a possibility?
It is, and that's where that adoption policy would come in. I mean, obviously, that's something we're going to have to test, and we're going to have to see how it works, and we're going to probably find problems with it that we need to add more fields to tweak the policies. But ideally, like probably what I would do, the approach I would take, just thinking off the cuff, would be change my I would do it one of 2 ways. I would either go in and change the underlying labels on the cluster so they fall out of the set that PVS is managing. First, setting my deletion policy to orphan, which basically says, when you fall out of my set, I don't delete you. I just remove my owner ref and you're on your own. And then I would create a new PVS with that new set of labels that has an adoption policy of adopt. And then now I've split that set into 2 different sets that can be managed independently.
Okay, cool. Thanks, John. I think, yeah, I was just trying to see whether our bases are covered. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, again, what I said, I think before I started the recording, for those recording, like a lot of what we're talking about here is, these are the ideas. I talked about what's been implemented so far, but there are gaps between what Nafio needs and what's implemented so far. So our goal as a team, not in this call, but as a team, is to exercise what we have by trying to use it to do what we need to do, and we will find very visible gaps very quickly. And I have some of those. I have a design proposal for package variant set that's not merged yet, but like I'll link it in the agenda. It might be in last week's part of the agenda. I'm not sure, but I've shared it a few times. And so that's the place kind of where we would want to comment on it. The big thing that's missing, if there aren't other questions on the existing functionality, I can talk a little bit about this. Okay. If you went through the workshop, one of the interesting things we did is we introduced this idea of config injection during fan out. So to review that, we had the precursor to package variant and package variant set was package deployment. So we had this controller in the workshop, and it didn't do things like adoption policy, deletion policy, right? It basically was happy path day one and otherwise died, right? Whereas the other things are hopefully more robust and are intended to be more robust than that. But what it did do is it handled what package variant set and package variant do both. So it did the fan out and did the clone without creating a separate resource in between. And it did something really interesting, which we call config injection. So the idea is that in your management cluster over here, it's almost like, I'm sure many of you are familiar with CMDB, right? A CMDB is a database with a bunch of configuration information about different entities. It's got a model of what the resources we're configuring should look like. This really is effectively the same idea. We're just putting it in Kubernetes and adding declarative language around the declarativeness around it. The idea is that in your management cluster, you have a bunch of things. You've got about your workload clusters: cluster A, cluster B, cluster C, and that kind of information is stuff like the site code. Maybe there's a site code, the region, and we can even go so far as to say the CNI driver availability across a node pool. Like, let's pretend we have this thing called a node pool. So we have a slightly more sophisticated model than we did in the workshop, where we just had a cluster where we have node pools within that cluster, and then there's maybe each of those nodes in that cluster. The idea of a node pool, I think they use it in cluster, like Cluster API too. We use it in GKE. I think other people use it. I don't think it's particularly unique. The idea is this is a set of nodes that are all identical. And so if you want two different flavors of nodes in your cluster, you create two different node pools, and then it's this immutable infrastructure, and all those nodes look the same. So things like the CNI plugins that are on them, and maybe some information about the interface names, we can actually count on that being there in that node. We can count on different things being installed, and so then we can use that information. So this is the kind of information that we had for each cluster, and so when we do this, we have an upstream, and the upstream in it has a resource in it. It looks like one of these resources that are in the management cluster, but it's a placeholder. So it's got a cluster, and that cluster, to identify it as a placeholder, is tagged as a config injection. And it's got a group, a version, and a kind to identify that it's a cluster type of resource. And it's got an annotation that says I'm a config injection. During the fan out, so this is the upstream package. During the fan out, we go and we create one downstream for each of these three clusters. And what the package deployment controller did is it looked through this package and looked for any resources that were tagged as a config injection point. Then it said, okay, I found one, this cluster context thing. So I'm going to look, and now I'm fanning out for cluster B, or cluster A rather. When I'm fanning out for cluster A, I'm going to take this GVK from this annotated thing, and I'm going to look for a resource in the management cluster with that GVK and the name cluster A. And I'm going to copy that. I'm going to take the spec from that, not the whole thing, but the spec from that. And I'm going to overwrite the spec from the in package resource. Similarly, obviously, cluster B. So now what we've done is we've not just fanned out an identical package, one for each cluster, but we've actually introduced variants. We've created variants of that package that are specific to that cluster. We had additional controllers that fall into the package specialization project that came into play after this and took information like the site code and used it to make a new resource in here that then an IPAM controller came in and used that information, which is different across each of these packages, to make a request to an IPAM system, which allocated an IP address that's unique to that individual service in that individual cluster. So that's how the boundary between this group and that group fits, is that we stop right here, like, and something else might pick up and use the information that we've injected. So that's what package deployment did. The biggest glaring hole is that package variant doesn't do that today. It doesn't have config injection today. So that's one of the main things we need to solve. That might be the only thing we actually need, but I don't know, which is why I want for us as a team to actually try to create a package that represents a network function. This will exercise the CRD structure that we've built for these network functions. It will exercise the package variant and package variant set functionality to see what's missing. And it'll exercise eventually the package specialization subproject functionality as well. What I have done, well, let me stop there and ask any questions. We have like 9 minutes left. I for one can run over, but I don't know if I can keep this room for another 30 minutes. I would have to look at the calendar for the room. But Paula, yeah.
Yeah, John. So the package variant is the functionality of Porch, right? I just wanted to understand that. So if that's the case, the package, the thing that we did in package deployment that you said here, and what package variant does today, I think what package variant does today, I'm just thinking out loud here. I think it's very generic, and it's kind of desired, I would say, take the upstream, find it out without any opinions into downstream systems. But here in this particular case, what we are suggesting is do the injection, basically take the spec, look for a particular CR with those GVKs, and then inject the spec. Do you think that is also a generic use case that should be put in Porch, or do you think that's a very specific to Nephew that needs to live outside of that? I just wanted to see your opinion on that.
Yeah, no, I definitely think it's a generic functionality. So if you look at the design proposal, because so I have other use cases for this, right? So imagine, for example, I want to, like I said earlier, I have a package that provisions a namespace, and I want to inject, or I want to create a namespace for each developer in my organization on some big shared development cluster. I can create a package for that then I can actually create a package variant set that reads my list of developers, mutates the individual packages that it's creating. So it creates individual package variants that change the name based upon the developer, but maybe also pull in some information about that developer's in this organization. So I don't know, they get more resources or whatever. Like there's absolutely other use cases for it. And I'm trying to, I have a plan to list a bunch of those in the package variant design proposal in Porch. So some of this work would be upstream Porch, which I don't know if that's a problem because there's like a Google CLA and we haven't gotten that into a foundation yet, although I will say it's something we're working on. We can also, worst case, fork it and do the development in Nefio and then upstream it later. I'd rather not do that, but it's certainly something we could do. There's other things coming along that we're going to want, and like part of our discovery process will identify like dependency management and things like that that might be more, may or may not be more Nefio specific. Like I think there will be a combination of both, but my thinking is generally, I think what you're saying, Bala, which is when it's a general purpose functionality, we should push it upstream if we can.
Yeah, thanks, John. I agree. So if we do this in Porch, so would the intent be expressed by the user that, you know, when you fan out through the package variant set, the package variant should look for this particular GV case and then replace? Would that be a user intent? Would the user express it in some way, or would that be automatic?
So I think that it's expressed by the contents of the package. So the package author tags specific resources as a config injection point.
Okay.
Now, what we would need to make it more general purpose, we did something really, really simple here, is we used the name of the target and that was it. That's probably not sufficient. We probably need an expression for the name. So we can, that way we can pull the name off of a label or an annotation or derive it from a field, which allows quite a bit more flexibility. So that's part of the proposal as well. So if we go back to package variant, the pieces I see really missing are actually the thing that's in the name. It's introducing variants. So what it does today is it fans out, but it doesn't, other than the package name, which you can change, it doesn't really allow you to introduce variants into the package. There's things we can do based off the package name. A kept function can look at the package name and use it to rename resources. So you can actually create variants just keyed off of the package name, but that's not sufficient for Nefio or probably for almost anybody else in the world. So I've listed several different ways in the design proposal of introducing variants during that package variant process. Another one we could do that we may or may not want to do is execute kept functions outside the function pipeline of the package. So it's equivalent in Tal's workshop. What did you do? You cloned a kept package. You ran a kept function eval set namespace, blah, blah, blah. So that's an imperative call to the set namespace function. You could list that imperative call in a package variant, and then it would execute only when, you know, under fewer circumstances than if you added it to the actual package pipeline. There's pros and cons to that set namespace. You probably want to put in the package pipeline, so if somebody throws a new resource in there, it automatically gets the namespace set. So that's probably not a good one, but there's ones like well, we talked about some, like, so this config injection, I'm going to get off of the topic. We only have 2 minutes left. I better stop. So other questions? Do you want to keep going? I can try and get this room. What do people think? Any thoughts? Speak up because I can't necessarily see chat.
So what are the options, John? So either continue or have one more session? Is that the,
So we have another session Thursday already on the schedule, which I'm happy to continue this then. I can also, like I said, try to, I have time to extend now for at least 30 minutes. But if I can't get the room, then the overhead of trying to, what one am I in?
I would prefer the Thursday session. We have a call
Okay.
with Arvind and others in the next 1 minute. Or,
Oh, really? Okay. All right, then let's
SIG Release Meeting
stop it
stuff.
here.
I don't want to miss it, basically. And it seems
Yeah.
like this is good enough for me to consume. You know, I need to go look at Tal's thing too. I'm only speaking for myself here, but
Okay. Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
gonna,
for me, it would also be better to take a break here. It's getting really late.
okay,
Thanks.
no problem. I'm getting kicked out anyway. So thank you all. Let's continue on Thursday. And please put questions in the document and then we can address them more quickly too. So thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
thanks, John. Thanks for
thanks,
the
John. Very useful.
Bye.
Great.